Hello and welcome back, and today I want to talk about a subject that, let's be honest, we've been kicking around in the air now for a few years. 2.5G, 2.5 Gigabit Ethernet, 2.5G base T, whatever you want to call it. 2.5G is getting around, isn't it? Let's be honest, we can't say that it's completely adopted. We certainly can't say that it is widespread, but there's no avoiding that 2.5G is in the conversation when it comes to a lot of network appliances. Now, there's lots of reasons for that, and there's lots of reasons that can stem from companies trying to get a little bit of bunts out of you, to genuine reasons that what 2.5G is a consideration right now, because there's a lot of people watching this video who I'm sure are going, I'm just going to go straight to 10G, mate, and fair play to you. It's a great idea. 10G, it's 4 times better than that. It's 10 times better than 1G. But it's not always as straightforward as that. And for many, 10GbE is not only overkill in terms of price, but it's overkill in terms of sheer bandwidth saturation and overkill in terms of power utilization. So in today's video, much like my Before You Buys, and I've done one similar to this a little while ago, about a year and a half ago, today we need to discuss 2.5G. I'm going to give you 5 real important discussion points about 2.5G and why it should be something you need to consider, and another 5 reasons why I think you should pop it back on the shelf and walk away. And hopefully these will resonate with some of you, because not everyone knows what to do. And I think now the newer generation of network attached storage is arriving on the scene, and a good portion of them have got 2.5G, and some of them seemingly don't. I think a lot of people, the conversation about 2.5G is being drawn straight into their wallet. So let's crack on with number 1. Now, future-proofing is one of those words that people throw around for good and for bad. Future-proofing can be that I'm buying this so I never have to buy again. And we all know the Discworld Terry Pratchett quote about Vimes and his boots, and that still holds true. But there's still no denying that future-proofing has also been used as a term as a bit of a scare tactic in the past. People go, why don't you pay a bit extra? It's future-proofing, isn't it? That doesn't always mean something good. But in terms of buying solutions, whenever you read lots of websites where they're trying to say, oh, you should buy this thing, or should I buy this thing, a lot of people will say, you should get it. It's future-proofing. Then someone else will go, no one's using 2.5G at the moment. What are you talking about? The fact of the matter is, future-proofing, it's about the future. I know that sounds condescending, but when it comes to buying a NAS like these, and we're going to focus a lot on NAS because that's the channel, 2.5G, you're buying something that you want to last 3, 4, 5 years or whatever. You don't intend to bin this thing in 24 months. So yes, 2.5GbE might not be the go-to prevalent replacer of 1G right this second, but it's going to get bigger, and bandwidth utilization and saturation is going to get bigger. So when people talk about future-proofing with 2.5G, myself included, what we're talking about is the fact that 2.5G is growing, and the basic standard of network interfaces is growing. It might not be there now, but there's a good chance it's going there in the next few years. When you're buying a product, don't base it on the fact, that's like saying, why do I need to buy an umbrella? It's not raining today. The principle still stands up. And 2.5G, particularly now it's starting to arrive at the same price as 1G, is eminently future-proof. And even if it doesn't come about, as long as it's arriving at the same price as 1G, the future-proofing of 2.5GbE, at least as far as NAS and client hardware, is not always appropriate to all devices that I'll touch on later on, is still an important factor. Shared bandwidth. Now, this is something, although this does apply to NAS, this is a lot broader. You may have noticed I've chucked a lot of old guff here on the table. These are all accessories and peripherals that I'm going to talk about in the video. There's the Synology new router, it's Wi-Fi 6, it's got 2.5G. There's an Amazon Fire Stick, there's Wi-Fi 6 Fire Sticks out there at the moment. You've got adapters, USB to 2.5G, USB Wi-Fi 6 adapters, and indeed 2.5 Gigabit Ethernet switches. Now, they don't just knock this stuff out because the industry trend is telling people to buy it. There's a little bit of that, let's be honest. But mainly it's because of bandwidth consumption. as devices have got more dependent on internet connections, and as streaming services and digital services have grown in popularity, shared bandwidth is becoming an increasing concern. If you use 1 gigabit Ethernet connections and you use a switch that's got, or your ISP router that's got nothing but 1Gs there, if one of the devices on there is being connected to or interfaced with all of the others, they're not getting 100 megabytes per second or 1 gigabit each. They are sharing that 1 gigabit. You could have a NAS connected via a single 1 gigabit Ethernet connection that's being interacted with 3, 4, 5 users all on the network. That means at full connection and not taking into account quality or priority of service, the result is that they are getting 20 to 25 megs each, and that's when it becomes a problem, particularly when Wi-Fi users dip in and there's sod all left for them. So shared bandwidth, 2.5G eases this considerably by allowing individual connections to have 2.5 times their bandwidth with the greater network. Now, maybe it's not going to be a big concern to you. Maybe 2.5 GB on your local area network's not an issue because your TV, your console and all of that are all on 1G. But even modern consoles are Wi-Fi 6 right now and therefore consuming more than 1G. Modern mobile phones over the last few years, Wi-Fi 6, laptops, tablets, they're all taking larger bites of the bandwidth. So having devices inside them or having a router where the internet service provider connection can facilitate a greater than gigabit internet connection, that shared bandwidth is eased by the utilization of 2.5G, whether you like it or not. Adapters, yes, that's right. Unlike trying to adapt 10 gigabit Ethernet into your laptop, your mobile phone or whatever, or any home console devices, upgrading towards 2.5G is way cheaper and way easier. 2.5 gigabit Ethernet adapters to USB can knock around for as low as £20 to £25. You don't need to use a PCIe upgrade card. You don't need to use a Thunderbolt to 10G adapter for like 200 quid. 25 quid, USB adapter, even old style USB 3.2 Gen 1 or USB 3, thanks USB for the naming convention. It allows you to attach 2.5 gigabit Ethernet to your system, and therefore you've got that bandwidth access there. And again, there are greater ones out there like this one. This is the QNAP 5 gigabit Ethernet to USB adapter. This is a completely different conversation. If anything, they went too future-proof on that. I like it, but no one's using 5G. But 2.5 gigabit Ethernet upgrades are considerably easier than 10 gigabit Ethernet upgrades. And I can give you a classic example there. If you're an office and you're upgrading your internal network, upgrading to 10 GbE while upgrading the router in the corner of the office, even if you go for affordable ones like that one, which are knocking around for 160 to 200 quid for the switch for the middle of the office, or if you go for like the Qhora router that's got 10G on it, all those extra systems need 10G upgrade cards for 80 to 120 quid. They need portable adapters like the Thunderbolt one for 200 quid. It works out more and more expensive. And that's only if you can use that bandwidth. So 2.5 GbE upgrades, be it individual or en masse, are considerably more affordable. And that's the other reason where 2.5 GbE has become more palatable for a lot of users. Internet service providers, I've already sort of touched on it, but a lot of internet service providers worldwide are now offering greater than gigabit speeds. Now, you have to factor in fair usage policies and the difference between upload and download, of course, but it has now become a great deal easier to have internet connections that surpass that 100 megabytes per second connection there. Now, when it comes to getting those gigabit internet services into your house, they are running into a router. If the router doesn't have 2.5 GbE, or at the very least you don't have a converter box which can then be catted into your router via a wall-mounted modem provided by the internet service provider, you're immediately going to be bottlenecked to 1 gigabit Ethernet there. Never get the full potential connection. You can get around it with lag and stuff like that, but you'll never get that full internet connection that you're paying for. Now, for those of you that do have routers provided by your internet service provider that have a single 2.5 gigabit Ethernet WAN port there, that can lead to an embarrassing situation when it comes to NAS, potentially. And that is, what if your Google Drive is connectable faster via 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports, WAN ports on your router and a greater than gigabit internet connection, what if that Google Drive can be accessed faster than the NAS in the same room? That's embarrassing. And the whole point of NAS was to not only give you your own private server, but faster performance as well and direct means of access. So 2.5 GbE allows that faster connectivity between them to be made possible. And ultimately, internet service providers providing greater than gigabit Ethernet was, for me, the firing pistol for 2.5 GbE overall, becoming a great deal more adoptable for most home users, not just business. And finally, saturation of 2.5 GbE when it comes to modern storage media, your hard drives, your SSD. Now, there was a time when NASes and any kind of remote access storage was reliant on hard drives, when hard drives were just tipping over the 100 megs performance point there. And ultimately, even if you had several drives in a RAID, the configurations behind them and the architecture that went into the processors used in these systems, they weren't really given the performance where 1 GbE was much of a problem. Even 10 GbE seemed a bit pie in the sky. But fast forward to now, we've got even standard class hard drives tipping 180 to 200 megabytes per second. We've got enterprise and data center class hard drives and Pro Series hard drives pushing 250, 260, 270 megabytes per second, and that's a single hard drive. Then you've got SSDs becoming more affordable. Ultimately, all of these storage methods are massively there's too much data saturation, too much data throughput potential that's immediately going to be bottlenecked by a 1 GbE connection. So whether you're using even a 2-bay NAS system, a 2-bay with 1 gigabit Ethernet there, it's not going to be able to saturate that full throughput potential of just 2 drives in a RAID 1 environment or even a RAID 0. So 2.5 GbE allows a greater degree of network saturation to a bunch of connected users or a single user, again using an adapter if need be, or directly into a switch for more to enjoy. The network saturation is a good thing, but having your storage potential and particularly the performance potential of multiple drives being throttled down to 1 GbE these days, even if you use link aggregation on multiple 1 GbE ports, it's pretty unsatisfactory. And with most 2.5 GbE NASs arriving with 2 ports, if you're going to talk lag, you've suddenly got access to 5 gigabit Ethernet there with a simple port trunking or link aggregation there. So modern multi-storage media presents a lot of throughput for 2.5 GbE to become a great deal more attractive. But let's be honest, 2.5 GbE is still not going to be for everyone. So although those were 5 compelling arguments for adopting 2.5 GbE in your next hardware setup, let's talk about 5 reasons why you want to pick it up and chuck it back on the shelf. The first one, and again, this harks back to when I was talking about the Amazon Fire Stick, most modern multimedia is not really going to saturate 2.5 gigabit Ethernet indeed, unless you're using some of the most ludicrous bitrate, high density, 4K, HDR, HEVC, monster media that's, tens, maybe even hundreds of gigabytes in size. Your 2.5 GbE and 1 GbE are much of a muchness. Enjoying multimedia because this is streamed in packet form, you're never accessing the full file at once. You are accessing it in nuggets. It's a slightly different setup if you're accessing remotely, because then you've got to factor in the package and exchange of data between 2 different locations. But over the local area network, 1 GbE is still doing a very good job when it comes to enjoying multimedia. Now, that isn't quite the same if it is multiple users accessing dense media at once, but even then you'd have to surpass 2 or 3 users to start to worry about 1 gigabit Ethernet being a problem there. So 2.5 GbE is less of a concern for multimedia users right now. Again, I mentioned this in the beginning, 2.5 gigabit Ethernet is still nowhere near as adopted in terms of overall availability a simple 1 gigabit Ethernet there. And now 2.5 GbE, it has its advantages, but right now, if you look on the market for how many solutions are 2.5G and how many are 10G, there are way more 10 gigabit Ethernet solutions out there. The market went from 10 to 50 to 100 megabit there, and like the gigabit there afterwards, and the slow adoption over decades, it went to 1 GbE. And even though 2.5 and 5 were available via auto negotiation, pretty much the industry went 10. And 10 was really expensive at that point, and we are talking mid to late noughties. And it's only in the decades since that the price of 10 has gone down, while the price of 1 GbE has largely remained the same. But 10's not quite there. Now, because the market, particularly the business market, adopted 10G as its next big formal step up, call it Moore's Law, call it whatever you want, 2.5 GbE is still nowhere near the adoption rate as 10G or even 1G right now, even though the price in some client devices that I'll talk about in a bit has been brought down. Ultimately, the price of, the adoption of 2.5 GbE is still frankly very low. Now this is changing. We're seeing ISP routers arriving with it. We're seeing routers from other fully featured premium class paid routers adopt it. We're seeing now that Wi-Fi 6 is arriving on the scene, that we need a LAN connection for a little bit of parity, but still 2.5 GbE, at least now at the moment, isn't as adopted. We can't speak for the future, but right now it's not as much of a concern at the time of recording. This is a weird one and something I've commented on in previous videos. Now, 2.5 GbE is available in multiple switches. QNAP have got one, Acer Store have got one, TP-Link have got one, Netgear have got one, D-Link have got one. They've all got 2.5 GbE switches and routers in their lineup. But the weird thing is, 2.5 gigabit Ethernet is 2.5 times the speed of 1 GbE. Yet all of the 2.5 GbE routers do not meet that kind of parity in terms of pricing. They do not cost 2.5 times the same price. Now, an example, this router here knocks around for about 130 to 150 pounds. It's an unmanaged 6-port 2.5 gigabit Ethernet router with a 10G port there on the top. It's a lovely stuff. This is one I've got for the studio. Can't wait to set it up. QNAP have got themselves a 2.5 GbE switch, the 1105 there. But even then, that price point is way more than 2.5 times the price of an unmanaged 1G router. You can pick up an unmanaged 5-port 1G router for about a tenner these days. If you want to go premium and go Netgear and get a lifetime warranty, it's about 12 to 15 quid. Whereas a lot of these 2.5G routers arriving on the scene are 80 to 100 or even more. And they're unmanaged as well. So the pricing of 2.5 gigabit Ethernet switches doesn't suit, it's not right. Now, one might argue it's to do with the bandwidth. You are being priced per gigabit, because again, there may be 5 ports versus 5 1 GbE ports, but bear in mind 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is not the same as 2.5, 5, 7.5, 10, 12.5 gigabit connectivity there. But still, the pricing of 2.5 GbE switches can be a real put-off. Going back to my earlier point about adapters and how easy it is and how affordable it is to upgrade to 2.5 GbE, there's still no denying that upgrading to 10 GbE may seem a little harder, but it's not exactly brain surgery. Upgrading to 10 GbE, there are affordable 10 gigabit Ethernet switches out there. There are even some 10G routers on the market with a single 10G port, and 10 GbE adoption is indeed possible. It's going to cost you more, but it is possible with 10G PCIEs and 10G external adapters over things like Thunderbolt. Now, when I mentioned earlier on about how affordable it would be to upgrade to 2.5 GbE, and it is a great deal more affordable, some people may think, do you know what, if I'm spending the money for an upgrade, once again there's that word, I want to go full future-proof, and therefore they decide to skip 2.5 GbE and think, I want something that's going to last 5 to 10 years for my setup, not 2 to 3 to 5, and that's where 10 GbE upgradability has become considerably easier over the years. So as easy as 2.5 GbE upgrades have become, we cannot also ignore the fact that the difficulty of 10 GbE, although still a pinch harder, is not exactly Ben Nevis in terms of an upheaval. And finally, I mentioned earlier on about one of the factors that has facilitated the growth of 2.5 GbE, and that is Wi-Fi 6. Wi-Fi 6 has now been largely adopted on most client hardware, laptops, in terms of phones, home consoles, even Amazon Fire Sticks. They're all adopting 2.5G gradually, Wi-Fi 6 gradually. There's also Wi-Fi 6 USB adapters with several on the market covering different bandwidths. Now, Wi-Fi 6, if you are utilizing it in standard 5 GHz connection, one device point-to-point, 160 MHz channel, you get about 1.2 gigabits per second. Some devices dual band will knock you up to 1.8, but ever since Synology started talking about breaking the 5.9 gigahertz channel, and again you can check out the video on that, they're able to have a single point-to-point connection of 2.4 gigabits there. That is almost 2.5 gig there. So that means you've now got wireless connectivity there, possible at 2.4G. With that in mind, then 2.5G, you're getting, what, 10 megs. Get out, who cares? And that's the real factor for a lot of users out there. They're looking at 2.5 GbE and going, well, I could scale up my wireless Wi-Fi 6, and with Wi-Fi 6E on the horizon, able to take advantage of the 6 gigahertz channel, that's even more potential performance on the table there, along with Wi-Fi 6 adapters arriving once again in USB form and PCIe upgrades. That's another reason why you might be looking at adopting 2.5 GbE and then suddenly realizing there is a wireless option that's giving you almost the same bandwidth depending on your setup. And for a number of you, the convenience of wireless Wi-Fi 6 may outdo wired 2.5 GbE, but there are so many factors here. You can't just look at your router or look at your switch or look at your NAS and make that the deciding device. 2.5 gigabit Ethernet adoption only really works when you've got multiple devices in your local area network. Don't look at this as a single upgrade, and don't just judge your NAS on its 2.5 GbE ports in 2022 and 2023. 2.5 GbE is a great thing, but only if the rest of your network architecture can take advantage of it. I hope you found this video helpful. It's a subject that is quite derided between different users, so it is good to talk about, particularly in 2022, when most NAS brands, apart from the big S, have seemingly adopted 2.5 GbE, leading to a lot of people wondering, should they or shouldn't they? Thank you so much for watching. Click like if you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe to learn more. Use the free advice section over on NAS Compares. Genuinely free. It's made by me, Eddie, and hopefully very soon a bunch of other people helping us out. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.